Good evening, televiewers. Welcome to Prime Hour on My Media Prime. We are very sorry for the late start. This evening, we are going to be looking at the concept of inclusive dialogue in the context of the Anglophone crisis. We've heard so many persons talk about holding an inclusive dialogue in Cameroon. Some say it has been done already, others say it is yet to be done. This evening, we're going to be finding out what it actually means to organize an inclusive dialogue, and also looking at what is ongoing, how inclusive has it been, and how do we make it more inclusive. What are the limitations to what people are talking about a possible inclusive or already inclusive dialogue for Cameroon, especially as we seek a way out of the ongoing crisis rocking the northwest and southwest regions. We are discussing this with our panelist, Apostle Ambe Valentine Ngwanyam in the house with us. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Liu. Good evening, Cameroonians, and welcome to today's edition of the program. We are going to be discussing something very sensitive, and we're very, very convinced today we're going to help Cameroonians understand the context of the inclusiveness of the dialogue that was held some 2 years ago with respect to the Anglophone crisis, because a lot of people are complaining within and without the nation that the dialogue was not inclusive as per the description of being inclusive.
Okay, we also are in the company of Dr. Nick Ngwanyam. Glad to have you, Doctor.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you again, and good evening, dear listeners. Today we'll be looking at this very sensitive topic, as Apostle Ambe has said, and we hope to be able to bring some enlightenment to the people.
But Achu Julius is supposed to be part of today's panel. We hope he beats traffic to join us, and as well as Mr. Mondoa, Paul, who is supposed to be joining this discussion from Switzerland, where he resides. We have some technical issues getting through to him. We hope to get that fixed so that we can enjoy his contributions to today's topic for what has been planned. I'll start with you, Dr. Nick Ngwanyam. When we talk about an inclusive dialogue in our context in Cameroon, what do we mean?
We've been talking about the inclusive dialogue, and we are looking specifically at solving the Anglophone problems. If you have listened to me talk before or write, you see, last time I came up with about a minimum of 5 to 9 dialogues that this country will have to be able to fix all the many problems we've got. And the Anglophone problem is one of the key problems that, if not addressed seriously, can cause a lot of problems for our security and for our nation and the stability of the nation. And when you talk about dialogue, that means two people talking, two people with a problem are talking with each other, not to each other, talking with each other. And we are saying that what we need as therapy is an inclusive and genuine dialogue to be able to address this Anglophone problem. And we went ahead to also say that what we had before did not follow the prescribed way in which a dialogue should be held. It didn't respect principles of a dialogue, and when you look at it very carefully, it looked more like a monologue, and that's why it was not working, and that's why the fruits are not being born. And so we are saying that the way forward, it doesn't matter, even if the Ambe has atomic bombs and the government has atomic bombs, nobody is going to win that war. We are only going to be destroying ourselves, and the most powerful weapon to solve the problem is truth and love, and truth and love that is brought to the table of dialogue. And when we are talking about dialogue, we are talking about, we are talking about two people who are hurting each other, sitting at that table and talking, not one person talking to himself.
Yes, Apostle Ambe Valentine, when they say we want an inclusive dialogue, we've seen the United Nations, the US, and many other countries say we want inclusive dialogue. Many persons also in Cameroon say they want inclusive dialogue. What do they mean specifically?
If we don't define the word inclusive, we're not able to understand the word inclusive dialogue. The word inclusive actually means embracing all people, irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their medical condition, irrespective of their disabilities or other needs. It is equally giving everyone access without any form of discrimination. Giving everyone access without any form of discrimination, allowing everybody to participate and also to bring their views on the table. That's actually the definition of being inclusive. Now, if I thought it has to do with giving access and without any form of discrimination, everyone the same opportunity, equal opportunities, and also embracing all people of all category, no matter the race, the gender, the disability, or other needs. If I thought that is a proper description of being inclusive, and then relating it with the national dialogue that held in Cameroon, there is a question mark with that, because it did not embrace all people. Number two, it didn't embrace all, it did not give opportunities for everybody to express themselves. It didn't give access to everyone, and equally, it did not give people the chance to express themselves. So if you look at it critically within the Cameroonian context of the national dialogue, there are some things that are missing when it comes to being inclusive. Embracing all people. A group of persons were not in the dialogue. As a matter of fact, the separatists in question, who are the ones actually causing the tension we are facing right now, who are supposed to be part of the discussion on that table. Number two, equal opportunities. Equal opportunities means everybody has the right to come with their own perspective, but there were conditions that you should not mention separation or mention federalism. Opportunities were not given equally. That was a question mark. People were stopped at the dialogue not to mention federalism, not to mention secession. That is not inclusive. Inclusive means we have equal opportunities, equal access. There's no form of discrimination. All people, irrespective of the gender, the disabilities, and wherever they are coming from, they have the right to come. Now, it is on that table that we now deliberate to see which of the ideas is more acceptable and better off to run the society.
Okay, but I'm sure when he took to the rostrum, Nick Ngwanyam, the chairman of the Social Democratic Front, he talked about a federation, and I'm sure Mr. Agbobala also raised the issue at the major national dialogue. Paul Mondoa, we're glad to have you. Good evening and welcome. And the first question I'll ask you is, what do you understand by inclusive dialogue in the context of the ongoing crisis rocking the Northwest and Southwest regions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Leo. Despite the little worries we got with the sound system, I think I'm with you now, and we can push forward. What I would like to look at, I'll pick from the definition and the framework laid by those on the set, and I would begin by looking at what we have at hand. We have the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon, and when you want to go by a theoretical definition of the word inclusive, then fail to answer the question of who should be included, I think there is something wanting. If I follow what was stated, I would say that in the current situation of the Anglophone crisis, there are 5 groups. Because to begin with, we are over 26 million 6 million Cameroonians. And if I go by the broad definition that was given of dialogue, it means everybody should be found on the table, which is not possible. Then the next step is, what do we get? How do we constitute a group that would be representative of all of us? And when you push further, the next thing you look at is which groups should be included, and that's where I would begin by differing a little with those on the panel on the other side. The Anglophone crisis summarily is categorized by 5 groups of persons, and there are 2 problems that constitute what we refer to as the Anglophone crisis today. There is the Anglophone problem in Cameroon, and then there is the crisis or the conflict. There are 2 different things. We know the problem that was there, that moved up to 2016, and we know the crisis that started from 2016. So when I will be intervening, I will intervene with this in mind. And looking at it from the crisis that started in 2016 till present date, I see 5 groups of persons. And from these 5 groups, we have the government, we have the separatists, we have another group that is trying to germinate, which I consider is the opportunists, and then you have the segregationists and the victims. There are 5 groups. I talked of the government, I talked of the separatists, I talked of the segregationists, I talked of the opportunists and then the victims. I would be speaking more with respect to what concerns the victims and what the victims expect. The victims include the ordinary you and I on the ground, who cannot have easy access to education, who cannot run his ordinary activities on a daily basis because of the insecurity brought about by the whole concept of the Anglophone crisis. And now when you look at the government, we know it's the administrative authorities and the others. Then the separatists, we know them. But these two groups that I brought in, the opportunists and the segregationists, I would want to belabor a little on that before submitting with those I consider should be included when it comes to the word inclusive. The opportunists are people who take advantage of the crisis to push forward other motives. For example, when we had the major national dialogue, ahead of the Diaspora Commission talking about dual nationality, I wonder if it was part of the Anglophone crisis. This particular group of persons will constitute what I would refer to as the opportunists. There are a group of persons who tell you that they are the federalists. They are not federalists. They are opportunists. They are taking advantage of the crisis to push forward an agenda they cannot stand before politically. And then you have the segregationists. The segregationists are another group that call themselves potentially the 10 state federalists that try to bring a divide that cannot suit the aspirations of the government, cannot suit the aspirations of the separatists, but they give you the impression that they are contributing to the debate. They are not. They will tell you about the Northwest, Southwest, with ideas to create their own region, which is the Southwest, and it gets it so confused. So if I try to unpack between the Anglophone crisis, as I said, and the Anglophone problem, and as I said, with respect to the Anglophone crisis, inclusiveness would only be defined by the parties involved in the crisis and those who have legitimacy to speak for the victims. It can only be the parties involved, which will be the government, the separatists, and those who have legitimacy to speak for the victims. So if those who call themselves federalists don't have legitimacy to speak for the victims, they have no place in the dialogue. Inclusiveness would not include them. If you want to look then at the Anglophone problem, then you look at the best representatives of the Anglophones as a people to engage with the government as an institution. Dr. Nick talked about 5 dialogues, which I don't know. I think further I'll get him to elaborate more on that, and I can pick from there to try and dissect further. But as it stands, I strongly believe that we have a minimum of a 2-stage dialogue that will be preconditioned by a parliamentary debate on the issue to decide on certain issues to develop in my second submission.
Okay.
And when we just come out from the blues talking about inclusive, we cannot get all problems in Cameroon to be solved through the Anglophone crisis.
Okay.
So for now, I think with this framework, I will be able to pick from what the other panelists would say, and then we see how to build further. Okay. Thanks very much, and I'll be very glad to get back to you once given the opportunity.
Okay, Dr. Nick Ngwanyam, we're talking about an inclusive dialogue. Who should call for such a dialogue? The government did that already, and some people still think that there should be an inclusive dialogue. And how do you, what are those ingredients that would make it genuinely inclusive?
Thank you very much for your question, but before I get lost in that detail, probably I should address some of the issues that Julian Paul has raised. And
Paul Mondoa.
Oh, Paul Mondoa. But is it not Julian Paul on our WhatsApp group?
His name is
Paul Mondoa.
Is Paul Mondoa?
Maybe Julia is this.
Is a different person?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Paul, it's easier. Now, you see, I think this is why it's very important to have this education. Otherwise, we get mixed up in a lot of issues, and we bring some other ingredients in and confuse people. If you take the Cameroonian population, let's start for starters. Who would be at the dialogue it would be Anglophones on the one hand and the government. The dialogue is not about Anglophones, Francophones, government, no. Francophones have their own problems. There are some other general problems in the country, and that's why I was saying that we will have a minimum of 5 to 9 dialogues, separate kinds of dialogues, to solve the problems of the country. And the Anglophone problem is just one of the problems. And when it comes to solving the Anglophone problem, we are not going to make the same mistake like was done during the major national dialogue, where the hall was filled with people who had no business being there. There were a lot of Francophones who came there and filled the benches and took up the time. And you know, like Paul was just saying, that they were talking double nationality and all these kinds. They brought a lot of confusing themes onto the table and confused everybody. And we had a party and left. And the real problem was not addressed. That is the issue, and we should not make that error again. So we are going to have a dialogue, and this dialogue is going to be between Anglophones and the government. Cameroon, I think we've said this before. Let me just go over it again just so that it's clear to everybody. Cameroon is like a dining table, and we have a tablecloth on the dining table. That tablecloth represents all those problems in Cameroon that affect Anglophones, that affect Francophones, that affect old people and young people, everybody. Then, the Anglophone problem is like a bowl of fufu corn or whatever that is standing on that table. So we are dealing with that bowl of fufu corn. So this basket of fufu corn, it is in a bowl, and it's also sitting on that tablecloth. That means that the Anglophone has his separate problems called the Anglophone problem. That is part A of his problems, and part B of his problems are some of those problems that hurt all Cameroonians. Which means that if you truly address the Anglophone problems on his entity, you would also be solving some of those problems that affect the other Cameroonians. Can I just explain this, because so that we don't get confused? It's very, very important. Otherwise, we start talking and making a lot of noise. The second kind of dialogue that we'll have at Cameroon will be the dialogue between the government and the Bamile case. The government and the Northerners, they have their specific problems. The government and the Betis, the government and the young people. These are different dialogues.
Let's stay to the topic. Yes, my question to you is, what are those ingredients that should be on the table to describe a dialogue as being inclusive?
Good.
In the context of the Anglophone crisis.
It's very important.
Yes.
First and foremost, 3 categories of people will be present at that table. Mm-hmm. You know, Paul was trying to describe 5 groups of people. No. They are, on the one hand, you have the government, which must be there. Then when you come to the Anglophone side, you have the so-called unionists. You know them. Most of them are our elites in Yaoundé. They are unionists who believe that it should be a centralized government, and they are the proponents of this decentralization. Then you have federalists and confederalists. Paul thinks that is not important, but I'm sure it's a big mistake. And then you have separatists. So these are the main ideas we are discussing. Then he is talking of a group of people. Then there's the general population that is being kicked around, that doesn't have a say. They know what they want, but everybody is kicking them around like a football. So we are going to have, you know, people at the table who come from these different groups to actually examine the issues. And there will be a mechanism for doing that. You know, when the right time comes, like we've said before, the specialists are going to help us do that, so that these discussions will be held first amongst the Anglophones. Anglophones will talk to themselves. But the key thing about talking to themselves is there must be truth and love as part of the ingredients. If you leave out truth and love, everything goes out of the window.
Doctor, you have said severally that there should be this talk between the government and Anglophones.
Yes.
Now, are Anglophones not part of the government?
No. The Anglophones, well, you know, like somebody was trying to play a fast one, said that the major national dialogue was organized by the PM, who was an Anglophone. No, that's trying to rub people in mud. It's obfuscation. The government it's a whole institution, and we have Anglophones as a people. So even if that government was made up of, I'm sure we have about 70 ministers, right? Let's say that the government was made up of 70 ministers who are Anglophones. They represent the government, but the Anglophones are over here. It's not because the government is full of 70 people who are in government that they, no, that's a wrong argument. Because they are there, you know, to speak the mind of the government and try to help solve problems. Now, so that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah, we are theorizing in the studio here, Apostle Ambe Valentine Ngwa, about who should qualify to be in an inclusive dialogue, but we do not know whether all the parties would appreciate the involvement of others, because some persons will say we are separatists, we are the ones with the guns, so we do not recognize you. The federalists, we do not recognize you. The unionists, like he says. But now, how do you even get persons to qualify to be part of such an inclusive dialogue?
Until you know the...
Because just to follow up, he raised the issue of those who can legitimately represent the Anglophones. You say Anglophones should be there. Yes. How do you get
who are those legitimate people? We don't have them.
If we don't know what caused the problem, we will not know who to represent us. We have the Anglophone crisis and also the Ambazonia takeover. The Anglophone crisis started before 2016, which was a worry of teachers and lawyers. These teachers and lawyers had their worries which they presented to the government. And after presenting this thing, I could hear clearly within that period, it was about Bob Gahamoni said, it's either they give us a federal system or outright separation, which means two categories of persons were represented there. They were the federalists and the secessionists. After that, it came now to the Amazonian people where they wanted the outright separation, where a government was formed. Remember that there was no government that was formed when they were demanding for federation. Now, political parties in the country have been demanding for federation since. Frundi, since the 90s, have preached federalism till date. Other political parties have come up, they have preached federalism. Federalism, I don't think, is even one of the problems. Federalists are taking advantage of the situation right now because federalism was a political idea that came since before the Anglophone crisis.
Yeah, the SDF has always
preached federalism. So federalism is not even an issue. The issue here are the secessionists. Those are first and foremost the persons that, if I say, we still have crisis today, because the federalists are freely walking the streets of this country. They talk freely. They sit, but the people who cannot sit in this country are the secessionists. And if we have a crisis today, it's still held by the secessionists. If the secessionists give up today, there will be no crisis. All the federalists are taking advantage of the situation on ground to sell their idea. It wasn't part of the crisis. We are dealing with the Anglophone crisis. The Anglophone crisis is the issue of the secessionists. They want outright separation. So the people we need on the table are the people who are causing the brouhaha right now, which are the secessionists, not federalists. There was no crisis in 1994, 95, 96, where Frundi was pressing federation. There was no crisis. Now, to even come to the national dialogue, because the issue is the definition of the inclusiveness is one thing, and then the agenda or the content of the dialogue is another thing. What they went there to discuss was out of context. If they are called a national dialogue, they can't call a national dialogue for federalism. They cannot. They will never call a national dialogue to discuss on federalism. Number two, they will never call a national dialogue to discuss on special status. Special status was voted in 1996 in the parliament and it was endorsed. It needed just execution. We did not need a national dialogue for special status to go from. So the contents of the dialogue and the persons in the dialogue were out of order. The next thing that is causing us problem right now are the secessionists. So the people we are calling a national dialogue for is for secessionists, because it is a problem we want to solve. Federalism has never been a problem. It's your philosophy, it's your idea, it's your political desire. You may win the party, win the elections, and then institute federalism. If you don't win the elections, you cannot. So what is giving us headache right now? What took children out of school? Secessionists. What took people out of work? Teachers out of school. CDCs going down. All the activities. Houses being burned. People dying. It's secessionists. So the national dialogue was called to solve the secessionist problem, not confederation problem. It's a philosophy. That's why confederation can live here, but philosophy cannot stay here.
So Dr. Nick, you are saying he's an opportunist?
Of course. Of course. Okay. Federalists are opportunists to this crisis.
Okay.
Now, let me learn, Mr. Leo.
Yes.
They are opportunists to this crisis. Let us be very, very frank on this platform, because we are here to educate Cameroonians and tell the truth. You don't need to be out of this country, the Confederationists or Federalists. But if you look at it, the people who are under Hunt are who? Are the secessionists. So the national dialogue was called because children were deprived from going to school, caused by the secessionists, not Federalists. The national dialogue was called because people were dying, houses were being burnt, properties were going down, school disrupted, other activities halted in the north and the south because of the secessionists, not Federalists, not Confederationists. Now, if they are called national dialogue, is to discuss on how to solve the problem of the secessionists in order not to continue bringing more pressure to the northwest and the southwest. Because if you take out the secessionist agenda today, there will be no crisis in the northwest and the southwest.
Okay. There will be no
can I just ask for 1 minute to just let us go over one or two things so that the public doesn't get confused. Now, when we talk about this Anglophone crisis, there's something that we got to understand. There's the Anglophone problem, which is a problem of marginalization and assimilation made worse by bad governance. The teachers' problem and lawyers' problems are just triggering events, okay, to the crisis. So, like a friend of mine was correcting me this morning, or just bringing to my attention, or just saying what we know, was saying that during a crisis or a revolution like we have it like this, you have some long-standing problems that have been there and that have not been addressed. Then you would have a trigger. You will have something that would trigger, and when it triggers, if you are solving those temporal problems that have just come, you are not really solving the problem. You have to solve the root problems. We need to understand that. So when we are talking, it's not about lawyers and teachers. It's not about the English language. Those are little triggering effects. It's like, and to make us understand, you know, he was quoting this example of the French Revolution, where the people asked for bread.
Okay.
But the issue was not bread. You know, it was just a triggering event.
Okay.
Of
Okay.
course.
Yes. Paul Mondoa, we are following up what Apostle Ambe just said, but I want to say with you about the legitimacy of those who should be considered eligible to be part of an inclusive dialogue for the Anglophone crisis. Should we consider persons who are not Cameroonians to be part of this? I'm talking about looking at bringing in external forces into something that should be inclusive.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. I should begin by commending Apostle Ambe for being able to pick the signal I sent. And he has enabled me that we silence two of the groups which I described as the segregationists and the opportunists. So we're already now working within the confines of three. And I think in my initial submission, I said, whatever we want to talk as a dialogue must be preceded by a parliamentary debate. And when I talk about the parliamentary debate, what am I trying to bring up? Like Apostle Ambe said, it's an issue that seeks to silence separatists. And to silence separatists, there are two options. You can do that militarily, or you can do that through a dialogue. Militarily, we see the extent it has taken and is wasting lives. The alternative and the most recommended option should be a dialogue. The question now becomes a dialogue on what and a dialogue with who? Would Cameroonians admit that the government of Cameroon dialogue with former Cameroonians, that's those who by default have lost their nationality, on issues that concern the country? If this should obtain, it means anybody can get up tomorrow, pick up arms against the government, and seek for a dialogue, and then compel the dialogue. I hear people who talk of mediated settlements or whatnot. I want to be categorically clear. A state is an entity governed by law. And a state has certain rights that cannot be abused or withdrawn by anybody. When I hear people say the government should drop arms, you don't say that. It's not done anywhere. If in countries like the US they could not dialogue with bin Laden, I don't expect the government of Cameroon to dialogue with people who challenges its authority. So I believe logically that the first step is for us to admit and recognize the rights of the government, the duties of the government, as well as the rights of Anglophones and the duties of Anglophones. Talking about the legitimacy, are separatists the legitimate representatives of Anglophones in Cameroon? Obviously, the answer is no. Separatists are not the legitimate representatives. Dr. Nick talked a while ago about teachers and lawyers advancing political claims. I have personal issues with that. And I think you just give me a few minutes to elaborate a little more on that. Lawyers came up with their complaints, which were sectorial. Teachers came up with their complaints. Unfortunately, the University of where students strike came and all of that came together. The teachers were, the lawyers, I'll be specific on them, were fighting for the common law and went further to constitute a coalition under the consortium, which amounted to solidarity striking with intent to cripple state institutions. That's hostility against the state. That's hostility against the state. And that is what opened the floodgates of barbarism and criminality we are trying to address today. Separatists, if they want to be separatists, I don't refuse, but they should get the legitimacy of Anglophones, who would potentially send them to Yaoundé as parliamentarians and senators, and then they can stage a walkout like Ndeli did in Nigeria. That will mark a separation that they want. But they can't impose an agenda and want to and force fit themselves as the legitimate voice of Anglophones. As it stands, it's a political issue, and legitimacy can only be defined by the consent of the people. Have you been delegated by the people? Have you been designated by the people? You cannot be talking of wanting to become a legitimate representative of the people and you stop elections, for example. All of us know that separatists, or let me put it, the Anglophone crisis, distorted elections in 2018 and 2020 in the Northwest and Southwest. No matter what obtains, these are the people we have as representatives for now. And I believe that if you want to be the voice bearer of Anglophones, go through the political process, secure the voice of the people through the polling booth, and speak out for the people. For now, I know that the government is involved. Yeah, I'm trying to dissect the government into its three components. The government is involved as the executive, the government is involved as the judiciary, and the government is involved as the legislator. I would silence the government as the executive because the government is part of the problem. The government as an executive is what is fighting the separatists. And the government as the judiciary equally should be silenced, because if we proceed on the judicial basis, then a question of what law will be applicable to judge who and what becomes an issue. And many of these people will be pushed to jail, which will aggravate the situation. Now, I look at the government as the legislator. They have the possibility to make amends. They have the possibility to make proposals that will change. And one of these key proposals is to give momentum to the executive on how to act. If the legislator can table the bill on dual nationality and open up for former Cameroonians to regain their nationality, then they become legitimate to be involved in the dialogue. But if the legislator does not open this door, it then becomes incumbent on the executive to continue to the route to instill peace through forceful means. There are just two options. Either the legislator opens the door for considerations to be made on separatists to be brought on the table, and it should be very clear that the dialogue should be defined. Contrary to what one of the panelists, I don't think I retained, said that we should just come and begin to debate things. We cannot just come and begin to debate things. I have said on several platforms that the dialogue must be reconciliatory. Anything short of reconciliatory would not take us any step further. You can't come to a dialogue and say you want separation, I want federalism or whatever. What I believe should be done is that the first step is we want a reconciliatory dialogue. which means we want to maintain and uphold the entity Cameroon. I know questions will come after this, which I will gladly dive into, to look at the whole existence of the entity Cameroon. Because people say there was no union. I think some of the separatists would gladly tell you that most of them say Jumba not be married, taking reference to Panjoli Tumbe. But I tell them that if you take it to a competent tribunal, there is a union between the former British Southern Cameroons and the then La République du Cameroun. A union will be established by Estoppel, those who will master the legal principles. There was a union. Even if it was not formalized on a piece of paper, there was a union. So this question of we were does not exist. The question is the way forward. And it can only be on the premise of reconciliation.
Okay.
And why reconciliation? The government acknowledged through the most authoritative voice, that of the president, that in an attempt to harmonize, there was a failed process to harmonize that led to an apparent assimilation, if I want to paraphrase from what was stated. Having acknowledged that there was a problem, I strongly believe all those who said there was a problem should be released. That's my first thinking.
Okay.
There was a problem, the approaches were different, we have recognized that we all made mistakes. I believe that the first thing that should be done should be everybody should be released, a ceasefire should be pronounced, security should be reinforced. Security in this case would involve militarization. And then we open up to the victims, the ordinary you and I, and be given the opportunity to select who would bear my message on how the crisis will be resolved.
Okay.
So I would plead that for now, there should be room for a ceasefire, and this ceasefire can only come from the political, wherein the president makes another pronouncement. I know he has made several pronouncements.
Okay.
I'll plead again that he makes another pronouncement that would encourage people to get involved and engaged. But if separatists are not prepared to drop their weapons, I am speaking as an Anglophone, I am speaking as a victim, it will be pretty difficult for the government to cede.
Okay.
We can't put the government and the non-state state actors on the same pedestal. Okay. This should be very, very clear. Thank you.
Yeah, we've just been joined by Barrister Achu Julius, like I announced at the beginning of the program. Surely he was caught in traffic. He's here. We already were looking at the definition of how an inclusive dialogue in the context of the Anglophone crisis should look like.
Thank you, Mr. Kum, for inviting me today. It's a very interesting topic, and I think we've been spilling a lot of saliva about it for some time today. We talk about dialogue which is inclusive. The first point is that we fail to understand that the government has done its best when it comes to dialoguing. And maybe the government's best cannot be the best of each individual. They convened a major national dialogue some time ago that culminated in certain acts that were put in place. And whether you like it or not, most of those resolutions are being acted upon today. I cannot tell you conclusively what must have been done, but by every indication, the resolutions that were taken, certain structures have been put in place to make sure that those resolutions come to fruition. But in any case, we start talking about inclusive dialogue now. We forget again that those who are the troubleshooters or the troublemakers in this country are those who have taken up arms, because if arms by a civilian population were not the problem, we should have been having a crisis. Because don't forget that the so-called division amongst Anglophones and Francophones concerning the political state of Cameroon is something that dates since 1961. But since arms were never involved, it never ended in a crisis. The head of state said it clearly. Please, I would like to talk. But to talk, you have to drop your guns. You can't be talking to me when you're carrying guns. And he said, look, whether you like it or not, if you spill human blood as a soldier, you have to pass through a psychological process. And the process in Cameroon is what we call the rehabilitation center, whereby you go there, you meet psychiatrists, sociologists, psychologists to talk to you, to bring you back as a human being, because you have done certain things which is not society friendly. Dialogue, to me, is not an instant issue. It is a process, because you cannot tell me that dialogue we will not talk about the crisis. We will not talk about the crisis for the next 100 years. We'll continue talking about it. We're talking about the issue, the conflict, or the problem, or the misunderstanding, or the way, the modus operandi between Francophones and Anglos in 1961. Have we not been talking about it? That's a form of dialogue. A dialogue just means where 2 or 3 people are sitting somewhere and talking about certain issues, and that is a dialogue. This same issue, as I always say, continues in our various associations. There is no association in Cameroon now, especially of people of English extraction who don't talk about this about the crisis. There is no country meeting or village meeting that doesn't talk about it. There is no association of guys, no meeting or club or whatever that sits without talking about it. And if you notice, this thing has evolved. It has evolved in such a way that it is becoming common knowledge as to the root causes, as to what happened and what is supposed to happen. Everybody has an idea, but now it's difficult to take everybody with everybody's idea to put in one basket and sit and decide. So I like the way the speaker before me said it. We need legitimate and legal representatives for them to have a say, for them to make sure that things are done in the way the people want. Because if we just say one dialogue and we convene any Tom, Dick, and Harry to come and say what they think without having the support or the backup or would that be the people's choice, all what they're going to say will never water down in good faith, and the people will take it with a pinch of salt all the time.
Okay. Now, Dr. Nick, almost everybody's talking about the issue of legitimacy of those two, if we were to say that we want an inclusive dialogue. Yeah. There was a major national dialogue in Yaoundé that held 3 years ago. Yeah. But when we talk about inclusive dialogue, you say Anglophones and the government.
Yes.
Anglophones and the government.
Right.
Though we have Anglophones within the government circle. But now, the issue of legitimacy, how do you get those who qualify to represent the people?
That's right. You remember that before the major national dialogue, His Eminence, Christian Cardinal Tumi of blessed memory, wanted Anglophones to meet as a family. But that move of his was torpedoed by some people who did not want that meeting, because if there had been that meeting, the face of the major national dialogue would have been different. So to not create problem to the already agreed answers of the major national dialogue, they would not let the cardinal sit with Anglophones and talk like a family, which was a huge mistake, and we are living the fruits of that mistake today. And so, since there's going to be another dialogue, we must make sure that we do things properly. And like I said before, we have a lot of specialists in Cameroon who are used to conflict management and so on, and they're going to guide us, step by step, and then help us to come out of this mess. And to say again that we go back to that statement that the president made, and I keep regretting the fact that His Excellency President Paul Biya, when talking to Mr. Mo Ibrahim during the Paris Peace Conference in 2019, he was saying this after the major national dialogue was held, and saying, look, this is the Anglophone problem, and what happened was that those of us Francophones who were trying to change these Anglophones into Francophones, which is a very bad experiment. It never worked, and we think we should abandon it and do something else. That is actually accepting and defining what that Anglophone problem is. But you see there are a lot of professors and and professors of history, professors of sociology, physiology, you know, who are part of the problem, they never pay attention to what the president
but Dr. You are still not answering my question.
No, wait
my
a
question
minute.
has to do with legitimacy
And
of those who are supposed to be involved in the inclusive dialogue that you're talking about.
The Anglophones
Yes.
are going to go through a mechanism to select the people that will represent them. But, you know, like Julie was saying, there must be separatists at that table. There must be federalists who are locked in prison now, like Tabe at that table.
Is he a federalist? He is not a federalist.
Oh, okay, whatever. But they will be at that table, okay? Nobody will be left out. They are Cameroonians abroad seeking a double nationality, and we try to push them and make them look like they're not Cameroonians. It's the biggest of lies.
At the table,
they will be there.
Yes, at the table, are they sitting as Cameroonians or as Ambazonians?
No, wait a minute. Don't bring that confusion here.
No, it's not a confusion.
No.
It is not a confusion.
Who are Ambazonians?
Yes, you. Are they sitting at the table as Cameroonians or as Ambazonians in an inclusive dialogue?
They are sitting at the table as Cameroonians.
You are saying that they are Cameroonians.
No, they are Cameroonians. They are not Nigerians. They are not Americans.
Ayu Tabe has said it severally that he is an Ambazonian and not a Cameroonian.
Okay, whatever. But they came from West Cameroon. As long as they came from West Cameroon.
They are sitting as West Cameroonians.
As long as they came from West Cameroon, as long as their genetic material identifies with West Cameroon, they have a right to be there. It doesn't matter whether they went to the moon and took the nationality of the moon. They have a right to be there, and you have no business telling them that they cannot be there. You are nobody to tell them that kind of a thing. Either we are ready to solve the problem or want to continue to create problems. All Cameroonians are Cameroonians. Okay, and there's nothing like this one dyed his hair red and yellow and so on. That's rubbish. So all Cameroonians will be at that table. And when we are talking about legitimacy, it's not about the people in parliament, because they've had more than 4-5 years to address the problems, and they never opened their mouths to address the problem, and we are here today. So when we are talking about that legitimacy, it's not about them, because they have had all the opportunities and they never opened their mouths. So who has
legitimacy then?
The legitimacy. What you call separatists, who are Anglophones, all Anglophones have the legitimacy. And all Anglophones, but babies, have the legitimacy.
Even those who are in government?
Yes, all have the legitimacy. But now... How
about elected Anglophone MPs?
Well, if the government wants to send them there, if the government wants to send them there to the table, that's another thing. But to come as trying to represent Anglophones, the Anglophones themselves have to decide whether those of them who are either senators or parliamentarians should represent them, and they would have to answer the question, what have you been doing for the past 5 years? It's very important. Because if they were there to represent Anglophones, then they should not be seeing all the children and mothers and so on being killed, and they are saying nothing for 5 years.
That is what you are saying.
Yeah.
Apostle Ambe, Valentine Ngwa, we're talking about an inclusive dialogue. Inclusive for you say everybody is a Cameroonian,
yes,
and nobody is Ambazonian according to you. Nobody,
no,
we are all Cameroonians.
They are West Cameroonians. If you are a West Cameroonian, you are good.
That is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But Apostle Ambe, we have many persons who say it is the Swiss talks or nothing. The CDN is also saying that the talks must be a mediation by an international organization or a nation out of Cameroon. That is what they want. Now, we are talking about an inclusive dialogue. Is that also part of the inclusive dialogue here?
You see, from all flanks, the dialogue is not inclusive. The government has not made it inclusive. The separatists have not made it inclusive. Neither any of the groups have made the dialogue inclusive. Because if we define the word inclusive, it means everybody should come with their ideologies without superimposing on somebody. The government sets up a dialogue and says it doesn't want to hear secession. The separatists want a dialogue with negotiation to separate. They don't want anything like federalism, because even the secessionists will fight federalists. You see, already preconditions are attached to what they want. It doesn't make the dialogue inclusive. So if you want to talk about inclusive dialogue, both the government and the separatists have failed. They are going to Swiss because they want to go to Swiss to satisfy their desire. The government calls the dialogue in Yaoundé because the government wants to satisfy its desire. I've spoken about the definition of being inclusive and also the content of the dialogue. One of the things which were discussed in that national dialogue, which I think the government is trying to enact now, is the special status. The special status was a bill legally voted in the parliament. We did not need to have bloodshed, both from the military, civilians, houses being burned, for special status that the parliament of this nation voted peacefully. For them to go and be discussing an issue that was voted in the parliament freely is the brouhaha of the century. That makes the national dialogue out of context. Secondly, putting the condition that we must go to Swiss because Swiss will negotiate for us to separate is not inclusive. It brings a condition. Bringing also into Yaoundé and saying that there will be no separation discourse here does not make it inclusive. So from all flanks, both the separatists and the government are arrogant and superimposive, and they have not brought what we call inclusive dialogue. They are doing what is pleasing them, and that's not dialogue. Dialogue means there is no discrimination. Opportunities given to everybody. Access. I think we are not defining this thing very well. Access is one thing. Opportunities, equal opportunities, no discrimination. That's what we call inclusive dialogue. Now, if we want to calculate what was done in Yaoundé as inclusive dialogue, it was not inclusive. If we want to calculate what the separatists are asking in Swiss, it's not inclusive, because they are going there with already an agenda. It's like doing in Yaoundé and telling that we don't want secessionists here, and doing it in Swiss and saying we don't want unity here. So from every flank, there is no inclusiveness in the dialogue. If we talk about who are going to represent us, Mr. Leo, that a gas exploded in Nyos and moved into Oku. Oku will not tell others because the gas came from there, will not treat it. When we say we need legitimate people to sit, how legitimate is the killing of people who are dying in the north and southwest? How legitimate is the killing of children in Gabu? How legitimate is the killing of military forces by the separatists? We are in a hot pot and we need a solution. All this legitimacy is a bragadash. That's the sincere truth. The children were killing Gabu was not legitimate. The military, separatists have no right to carry gun. They are illegitimate. But now, let us go from the illegitimate background. How much are we losing? The casualties are untold. So we try to coin legitimacy when blood is flowing, houses are being burnt, properties are going down, military that we were supposed to use to defend ourselves against Boko Haram are dying. The military that Mondoa was supposed to use to advance other parts of the country, we are fueling military tankers, buying bullets to fight against our own fellow Cameroonians. They also separatists who are carrying guns. They are not legitimate. So let us get out of legitimacy. Let's go like the medical doctor who sees a pain at the appendix. He doesn't go and begin to study the history of appendicitis. He cuts off the pain. That's what we need now in Cameroon. We need a medical approach to this crisis. Cancer is at the breast. The doctor cuts it off. He doesn't go and begin to trace if at all the cancer went to Kumba and then came back to Tico like a historian. What we are doing is historical analysis. What we need now is to direct our energy to the problem and solve it. The separatists are not legitimate to carry gun, but they are killing. They are not legitimate to carry gun. They have stopped school. They are not legitimate to carry gun. They are causing government to waste much money. The government was not legitimate to kill innocent children in Gabo, but they killed the children. And we are going to talk about legitimate. What legitimate? The whole thing is illegitimate. And if we want to go from a legitimate point of view, we are going nowhere. Why? Getting down to that parliamentary debate. Oh, God. We don't even need gun for parliamentary debates in this country not to work. You don't need gun. Under a peaceful atmosphere, issues concerning this particular crisis have gone to that parliament and it was sidelined. So you are talking about, when I hear Mr. Paul Mondoa talking about legitimacy, it's getting me worried. The crisis in other countries, they focus on looking for a palpable solution to solve the crisis. All these politics were rigmaroling, wangling left to right and saying that legitimacy, the children who are dying in Northwest and Southwest, there's no legitimacy there. The guys carrying guns in the bushes, so the whole thing is illegitimate. What we need is a solution. And this dialogue, I repeat, was called because the separatists took guns and started killing. When Frundi was advocating for a federal system of government and even lost elections, we did not carry guns in this country. There was no dialogue. Anyone who had a confederation mentality was supposed to form a political party and start agitating for it ever since. Not waiting for Anglophone crisis to come up before you carry your cunning system to pass through the crisis and look for your place. That's a scheme. what is eating the bean seed is this separatist movement. And if a conference was, or a dialogue was to be called, it was supposed to be called with the issue of the separatist movement. We can settle all the confederation and the federation through elections in this country, but we are talking about something killing children, stopping them going to school, destroying buildings, and frustrating the economies of the country. So when we talk about the legitimacy of the dialogue, it doesn't make any sense. Let us now go into the place of who to bring on the table. We know of the people who are buying the guns. We know of those who are preaching secession and also injecting these young men to keep carrying gun and shooting. We know where they are. We know who they are. They even have a constitution, something called like a government. I don't care how legitimate or illegitimate is the government. Whatever it is, if you neglect cancer in your system because the cancer is not legitimate, it will kill you. Treat it before you start finding it legitimacy. Those guys are causing havoc, whether we like it or not. I've said, and this is my conclusion. We have two persons destroying this country, La Republique and Separatists. These La Republique are the people who make Cameroonians feel that there is another Cameroon. And these Separatists are we want Cameroonians. We don't want a Republic. We don't want Separatists. We want Cameroonians. I'm a Cameroonian. I'm not a Separatist. I'm not a Republic. La Republique is like some country from somewhere, and Separatists from another way. If it is Cameroon, Cameroon does not have boundaries. So let us be sincere and face this thing the way it is, and stop telling us that federalism, confederationism, the thing we are dealing here is separatists. And if separatists are telling me, if at all we confront the issue concerning separatists in this country, guns will stop smoking. Okay,
guns will stop smoking. Mr. Paul Mondoa, I want you to come in here. We should call for a genuine or inclusive dialogue in this case if we cannot recognize what the government did already. And we should finance such a dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. Before attempting an answer to the question you raised, I would want to pick a little from what Apostle Ambe said. He used an expression I don't like to use most of the time. He talks of La République and separatists are not Cameroonians, I'm a Cameroonian. It already divides. And when he developed further, he stated that separatists would only come to the table to talk separation, while the government will not acknowledge a discourse on separation. And when I submitted, when I did my initial submission, I started by saying that the dialogue should be defined and it should be on the premise of reconciliation. Because these are warring parties. The government is on one side, the separatists are on the other side, and the whole question of the existence of the entity Cameroon is what can define what can obtain in the course of a dialogue. No government, even if Apostle Ambe is made president today, even if you take any of the separatists and make them president of Cameroon, none of them will cede to a dialogue to partition the country. None of them. In this regard, don't expect the government to accommodate a dialogue on partitioning the country. Now, he acknowledged that separatists are not legitimate to bear arms. If you take separatists whom you acknowledge as being illegitimate, to put them on the same pedestal with the states, with conflicting ideas, it's obvious the state would take its position. Now, coming to the question you asked, I think in my initial submission I talked about the rights and duties of the state, and it's a duty of the state to preserve peace. So those to call for another dialogue, which I strongly recommend, and qualify as a reconciliatory dialogue, it's obviously the government. It's obviously the government. The question now is, has the government got what it takes to make this dialogue inclusive? And that is where you get the two groups of people I talked about, the opportunists and the segregationists. Because if you want to look at even within those in the diaspora constituting the Ambazonia, some of them are still Cameroonians, some have lost their rights as Cameroonians. And if you want to say you want to engage with these people, the question I would ask is, Which group are you engaging with? What is the message you are carrying across? As Anglophones, that's why I came back to talking about legitimacy. Legitimacy is not in terms of going to define who is in parliament or who it's whatsoever. I said it is imperative to have a parliamentary debate with the question of dual nationality brought on the table. This is what would open the door and give legality for those who lost nationality to be welcomed back home. When they are welcomed back home, the next thing I said is that the government should pronounce and negotiate for the sustenance of a ceasefire. That would treat the aspect of the Anglophone crisis, which I qualified, which started from 2016 onward. When this is done, then we must have unpacked what is killing Cameroonians. We can unpack what is stopping children from going to school, and then we can now face the Anglophone problem, which is the genesis. And in facing the Anglophone problem, we now start discussing as Cameroonians. Because like he rightly said, based on his qualification, La République is not Cameroon. Separatists are not Cameroon. It's a problem that concerns Cameroon and Cameroonians. How do we get to the point where we can sit together as children of the same nation and discuss? I think all these barriers must be removed. These barriers must be removed. And I went further to state that, having acknowledged that there was a problem, I believe that everyone who said there was a problem, irrespective of the method employed in stating that there was a problem, should be pardoned and released. Everyone involved in this crisis should, based on my opinion, should be released. I believe by then we must have said everything, the field would have been leveled, and then we start engaging. There we can now answer the question of who amongst us will be the bearer of the message of Anglophones as a people and the government as an institution. So, I mean, let's try and get the message that is put across before bouncing back. It's logical because there is no possibility. You get the government which says there is no separation. You get the separatists who say there is no federation or whatsoever. We want to go our separate ways. And these are the people bearing arms. And these are the outcomes of their actions are inflicting injury on the country and the people. We cannot, by some degree of fear, make recourse to cosmetic solutions. Because if we want to just go, I accept we just go. But what are we discussing on? How to partition the country? Or how to bring Cameroonians together? Separatists have said we have guns, we just want to move on. And the government has said Cameroon is one and indivisible. You can't face this thing without going into the genesis and getting the voice of Anglophones. When I talk of the voice of Anglophones, that's what brought the question of legitimacy. Who speaks for Anglophones? Who conveys the message of Anglophones? Is it the separatists? If the separatists, good. Then let it be endorsed that the separatists are engaging for Anglophones. If it's those whom I consider as opportunists who are the federalists, then they should speak. But the duty to silence the other parties becomes imperative. If separatists want to be the voice of Anglophones, then they should be able to silence the unionists and silence the federalists, as they call themselves. This is the biggest issue we have. This is the most challenging obstacle we have to overcome. If we cannot get out of this and to speak in one voice, there is no possibility, because it now becomes several Anglophones, because you have the separatists as one, you have the federalists as one, you have the confederalists as one, and you have the government as one. If you have to go by vote, the government is already outweighed. The government will not cede to that. Even if I am the president, or the person who is on the other camp becomes the president, it will be pretty difficult to cede to that. I am trying to propose what is workable, what can be accepted by all parties, what can be considered fair. So it's a bit intriguing when I get people bounce back on the question of legitimacy. If you want to get everybody, I accept. But are these people you want to get willing to convey a message that can lead to a consensus?
Now,
you rightly said that the government is on the left, the separatists are on the right. How do you get them to build a consensus around something?
Okay.
So it's a bit intriguing to get such a submission. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mondoa. Dr. Nick Ngwanyam, you want very inclusive and also even want to qualify genuine.
Yeah,
but genuine and inclusive from whose perspective? Because today you said that Kadinatumi wanted Anglophones to come together, and that move was torpedoed.
Yes.
But you should also recognize that even the separatists themselves were against that move, which means that if Kanatumi had had succeeded in having that meeting, going to represent Anglophones in Yaoundé, the separatists would never have recognized that. But now, when you look at the way the separatists are going, we have 5 IGs today, right?
Yeah.
You have 5 IGs. Nobody actually recognizes the other. We have Ake of C of Ayabacho. You have Ebenezer Akwanga and a host of others. They want a negotiated settlement. How do you bring them? You are bringing all of them now. How does it work?
It's very important that we realize that when a fire starts, put it out before it gets out of hand. So now we are dealing with a situation that is going out of hand, and we keep pretending that there's nothing we can do about it because it's going out of hand. And if you keep leaving it, it will get worse. A stitch in time saves 9. Either we do the right thing or we keep pretending that we don't do the right thing, and then people will continue to die and people will continue to suffer. So we need to sit down and do the right thing. When we are saying genuine means let us sit down and do the right thing. Let us look at each other eyeball to eyeball and speak truth to ourselves and speak truth to power and speak truth to the past and the future. Once we do this in all honesty and in love, you know, most of the problems will be solved. When Paul is talking about reconciliation and so on, you cannot have that reconciliation without love. So it's about that love. It must be an atmosphere of love and truth, where you actually tell your brother, I hurt you, please forgive me. Then the other one says, I also hurt you, please forgive me. Then once you have come to that understanding where you say, forgive me because I hurt you, then they will ask the next question, what exactly is the problem? And then you start dealing with the problem. I thought that he was trying to run away from the Anglophone problem, but you see in his analysis now, he says that we should do something which is a reconciliation to break the crisis, and then when the tempo goes down, then we can now begin to look at that Anglophone solution and solve it. So either way, we are going down that lane to address ourselves to the problem. It's very, very important, and we cannot run away from it. To try to run away from it will be cowardice. And I heard some rumors that even some of our ministers, directors, and some big people in government have dual nationality. It's a rumor. I don't know if it's true or it's false. Achu is here. He would tell us. No, I'm sure he will say it's a lie. But if we can prove that there's one person in Cameroon would do it, because I think I also read somewhere that the president has and can authorize somebody to have dual nationality. But what Paul was saying is that we should push that boundary and make sure that many of our children, our brothers and our sisters who are abroad in the diaspora should be given that opportunity to have the double nationality so that we can actually solve this problem very easily. And beyond that, anyway, you know that we need to correct our economics, our education, and what have you. And when these people who are so technologically advanced come home, they will help us to build our economies. So having a dual nationality is not just about solving the Anglophone problem, it will solve many other problems in the country. Again, it's very important that we do things rightly, but you know...
Dr. Nick, again.
Yeah.
I raised the division that reigns because earlier on you said everybody has to be at the table.
Yeah.
And I said some persons were ambassadors. You said no, everybody has to be here. And you raised the issue of late Christian Kanatumi. His move was also criticized and not endorsed by the separatists. We have several separatist movements today, and everybody says we are going to Swiss, others say we are going to Canada, others says it must be a negotiated settlement. How do you bring them in an inclusive dialogue as Cameroonians?
Yeah, I would try to pick on you a little bit and then push you to the wall also.
No, I'm asking a question.
It's a question, yes.
Okay.
Of course, we are talking to the, though it seems like we are talking to ourselves, actually, but we are addressing ourselves to the public.
Yes.
You see, there is no situation where you will have 100% purity. That's what you are asking. It doesn't exist.
Yes.
100% purity does not exist.
Yes.
You are looking for the majority of people to come along with you, and you explain what they've got to do, and you go along with them. So when we have our president who wins a presidential election at 70%, it means that 30% were not agreed, but he is the president. So that's what you are looking for. You are looking for that consensus position. And you know, when there's a lot of anger in the air, there are a lot of divergent views and so on. But as you begin to say something that is concrete and that people can identify with, then you will realize that the heat begins to fall down and people begin to come to that central position and agree on some things as we give and take. That's the bottom line. But if you think that all Cameroonians, 28 million Cameroonians will have to agree on something before it is true, or this does it, no, it doesn't exist anywhere in the world, not under the sun. Not even Jesus Christ could do that. So it doesn't exist.
It does not exist. Yes. No, the international community has been asking for an inclusive dialogue in Cameroon. We have international institutions also that have said so. We have also persons, Cameroonians, who are saying so. Can the international community impose on Cameroon on the type of dialogue that would suit their description as genuine and inclusive?
First and foremost, to push in an idea about a country, you must first of all show how you master the country and how things do operate.
Okay.
All those guys saying international community or whatever, to the best of my knowledge, they don't understand what is happening in Cameroon. They depend on hearsay. This man said that, and so on and so forth, without them knowing what's the reality of the ground. No, this country is a country of intellectuals, and I can bet you Cameroon can easily quote 5 million intellectuals. So it is difficult for there to be some sort of a union of ideas. It's very difficult in Cameroon because everybody seems to know, and everybody wants to show that he knows more than the other. As of date, we have a government. But the surprising thing is that the government takes decision, but there you always find people in the public who say that government decision is not the best. We don't want it. We want some other thing. But those who say want some other thing never do what it takes to be that government. Nobody, they don't do that. They are content on saying it, criticizing it, but they say, okay, fine, it's a good thing. If you think you have a brighter idea, what does it take? You have that thinking, what does it take for you to become that government to take that idea that everybody will want? So at the end of it, whether you like it or not, it's one election that can do that trick. When you move into wanting to understand how those things work in Cameroon, I will not accept that they send the free prisoners in Banso, the free prisoners in Womb, the free prisoners in Ndop. Some unscrupulous fellows give them guns, and you want these ex-convicts to be the ones to come and sit on a table called inclusive or whatever, to talk about how we should run the society in Cameroon. That's what we are saying, eh? Everybody wants to push his own idea, and those guys carrying on say, look, we are the ones who decide. But at the end of the day, this country is called La République Cameroon. It doesn't have two names. It's only one name called La République Cameroon. You look at identity card, all other official documents, it carries that name. So there's no La République Cameroon which is different from Cameroon in any case. But abide the idea that if any Cameroonian who realizes that he has wronged the society and is ready to make amends and apologizes, I'm sure the society will be very, very sensitive about such an apology and will forgive and forget. You should understand that when once we give a sovereignty to a president of a country to rule the country, he has a pen to sign amnesty to anybody who's under detention. But the problem, the onus is that you under detention, you're supposed to be the one to apply for it. Now, please, I'm sorry for what I did. I think I've changed. I now understand. I want to go back to the society. Please, can you rehabilitate me? Then the president, in this, with the powers that we have given him and as per the Constitution, can easily grant you that amnesty. But we could just can't sit like that. People carry guns and hurt people in the population, committing crimes here and there. I will just ask that you release them because we want reconciliation. We are just sending back to go and start all over. And do you know what the consequences may look like? Nobody doesn't know. We cannot actually manage that, because living without that apology, without that signs of remorse, you're sending them back into the society, you're going to cause more havoc. You're going to be very, very dangerous. We should understand that somebody rubbish the civil special status and whatever. It is provided for by the Constitution. I think if my memory is good, in section 65 or 66, that they can decide for one reason or other to create a special status of a certain portion or a certain part of Cameroon. It is possible, and that's what happened. So you see, the dialogue, and I'm sure it is Minister Carmen Fumu who raised that issue, and it was adopted by everybody. That's the way to solve this thing. Let's not forget that the Southern Cameroons had a special status through the indirect rule from Britain. It was some sort of quasi-autonomy that they were managing themselves in a particular manner, but supervised by Britain from a distance through Nigeria. So, but it's like some sort of a special status. What we need now is, how do we consolidate this thing to suit our needs? That's what we should look at. And the only way to do this is, all of us who have these brains, elections is in a few years to come. Let's go for elections. Those who think that their ideas are bright will be voted by the population. It doesn't matter in which party or political party you're going to belong to. But insofar as you manifest the intention of wanting to help, and you sell the ideas you have to the population, you'll be voted into. And I'm sure as you get in there, with the promise you made to the population, you're going to make sure your promises are fulfilled, because next time you'll never be voted. And we should know that when once you are a president of the country, it's difficult to share your power. And once you see that will to share that power, we should grab it. Can you imagine if it was a military dictatorship like we have in Chad or whatever? Who can talk? Or Burkina Faso or whatever, Mali. Who can talk? At least we have that possibility now in Cameroon, which is a democracy which may not be satisfactory, but it is possible. We can agree and say, look, this is democracy. The situation in which we are finding ourselves, the only solution is this. Whether you like it or not, no government in this world would tolerate that part of its territory be blocked or seized by people carrying guns. But whether you like it, for example, between Ukraine and Russia, the day Russia doesn't stop, this war will continue till kingdom come, because Ukrainians will never accept that part of their territory be taken by even a world power. They'll fight them as the Vietnamese did against the Americans and whatever in the 60s. Despite the fact that it was a power, they succeeded in fighting with themselves. It's going to be normal. And that's why in Cameroon, if you notice, I always quote this. I remember in the extreme north, the Grand North, as we call it Grand North, there was this issue of Coupe de Route, where you have brigands heavily armed that used to ambush people on the way. It took the government 9 years to stop it. That's why it's 9 years, 9 good years. And it means that to stop such a thing, you have to get into the fabrics, and you do it diligently, slowly, because don't forget, despite the fact that those criminals are doing what they're doing, they are Cameroonians. And as we know, when once you have criminals, they have to be brought to book. Otherwise, the rule of law will have no place in society. For now, what I like is that those guys carrying guns are criminals, because nobody would tolerate such the actions in society we have today. More so, the guns that they're using is not fighting an army. They're killing you and me who don't carry guns. So can you imagine that if all of us were carrying guns, what should have been the consequences? There should have been constant bloodshed and shooting every day, because I don't like a small Nick Pope to ask me to sit on the ground when I carry my own gun. He will shoot and I will shoot. And both will kill ourselves, and that will be continuous carnage and continuous disturbance which the society will not like it for a long time.
Okay. Apostle Ambe, we're talking about inclusive dialogue, and Paul Mondoa is talking about what should first come to our mind is a reconciliatory session that will pave the way to heal the wounds. Is that the prism from which you also say this?
Yes, Mr. Liu. You see, I used to tell people that no wound gets healed immediately. Wounds heal with time. And it takes reconciliation for peace to reign within any people. The crisis has evolved to the extent that we practically have lost a lot. We may pretend that the people of Northwest and Southwest have lost. The government equally has lost because that territory belongs to the government. And if the government knows that the territory belongs to them, then definitely they too have lost a lot of investment in that environment, education and other things put together. My worry right now is that we are trying to, how do I put it? We are trying to use some kind of scientific and political approach to handle a medical problem. This thing is a medical problem. Dr. Nick, you are here, this is a medical problem. And you don't go and begin to speak to an appendix in the lab that, Mr. Appendix, according to your urinary system, when you come down, full passes. No, that's what you learn in class. When you enter into the lab, you cut off the appendix for the person to get out of that pain. Look at Cameroon like the human anatomy. Look at Cameroon like somebody who has a cancerous sore on the body. And then look at that Cameroon as if you want to follow legislative, judiciary, executive, political analysis, the person may die with a cancerous sore. We have diagnosed this problem. The person that is a cancer now to the Cameroonian society is not a federalist. It's not a confederationist. We may discuss those things later. What we have now in this country and the greatest atrocities committed so far that has affected economic, social, political, and every sphere educationally are the separatists. And these separatists, without them, we have no crisis in this country anymore. We may have our internal crisis. We may have our political debates on worries of electoral processes and votes, rigging of elections and other things, the marginalization of the Anglophones. That marginalization has been there for years. It never became a subject matter until a dialogue was called nationally, until the separatists took arms. This crisis rocking this country right now that people have carried arms is the major cancer we have in this country. When we had Boko Haram, there was no national dialogue. We had a challenge in the East, no major national dialogue. Why are we holding this major national dialogue? We held the dialogue because the separatists came up with the arms struggle. And because of that, a dialogue was said. When we keep beating around the bush and we don't address what is actually eating us up in this country, we will keep on making noise and making noise and making, and nothing will happen. That's the simple truth. The cancer eating the body of this Cameroon now is a separatist. And if we must, I repeat, solve the problem of this country, whether we recognize them or we don't recognize them, we acknowledge them or don't acknowledge them, they are a cancer to the society. And we must do everything to cut it off. The first approach was military. Remember that when they were dealing with the UPC case in Cameroon, UPC did not just die all. There were a group of UPC militants that had a reconciliatory approach, and there were a group of Liberty militants that had a military approach. This is not the first time Cameroon is facing such an internal crisis. The UPC was equally like the Amazonian crisis. Aidjo used a reconciliatory and a military method. There are people in the southern Cameroons who are willing to go through a reconciliatory method. And I think if a majority of the southern Cameroonians are given the opportunity to sit and negotiate on some particular terms that can give the Anglophones a particular place, you will discover that this little group of separatists may equally even lost their presence in the country. The reason why the separatists seem a bit powerful is because even the Anglophones who are not separatists are not satisfied. And the secret is, if 5 people are against you, you satisfy 4 persons, 1 man becomes irrelevant. That is how it is. The greater population of this country, from the Anglophone part of the country, will be pleased if an Anglophone is giving the president of the Senate. Oh yes. If an Anglophone is given even the presidential position. If those particular things are given to Anglophones to some extent, it will curb down this crisis. I don't think every Anglophone that is angry with the government in question is a secessionist. Some Anglophones are angry with the state. And since the state cannot even meet up the demands of those Anglophones, it has even caused them to look like they are secessionists. It's not every Anglophone that is not comfortable with the government that's a secessionist. But the issue is, even those who are not secessionists, but they are not comfortable with the rulings of the government, are not even satisfied. So I believe if at all the matter is looked into properly, and attention is given, and proper critical analysis is given, because you cannot tell me that all Anglophones are secessionists. Not all. The Federalists are there. They are also agitating. Now, if these Federalists probably get what they are looking for, if the majority of Anglophone population is 8 million, and about Federalists are about 6 million, and secessionists about 2 million, do you realize that without even meeting the need of the Federalists, it amplifies the presence of the secessionists? It amplifies the presence of the secessionists. The secessionists may be a very little number, but because the majority has not even been satisfied, it looks like almost all of them are secessionists. So the problem we have right now is that the government should look deep into the Anglophone society and find out actually if everyone's worry is a worry of the secessionists. Yeah,
but the Prime Minister has been to Bamenda, has been to Boya, and we have had full of meetings as far as the implementation of the recommendations that we arrived at the major national dialogue. And the last meeting actually was a consultation amongst Anglophones.
Mm-hmm. And most of the things that the PM left and promised the Anglophones, he has done them.
I don't know. It's a question I'm asking.
You're asking me?
Yes.
We are in Cameroon, we have not seen any. That's what I'm telling you, understand that a lot of promises. Mm-hmm. They came up with a construction commission. Mm. Blow hot air, and it's going down. So you realize that even the people who are not secessionists, they feel deceived.
Okay. Mondoa, Paul, I want you, this may be your last intervention. What should be the way forward to finding a consensual position for stakeholders in this crisis?
Thank you very much, Mr. Leo. I would come back to Apostle Ambe. His previous submission got me a bit worried. Okay. But what he said now, I would want to push a question that he will pick up subsequently when he comes up with the next intervention. He made it very clear that, based on his analysis, that the separatists are potentially, I prefer speaking on the conditional, are potentially a minority. And if you address the position, the problems of the others, like the Federalists, the Unionists, and whatsoever, then you can just silence them. And before coming up with this, he made reference to the need to engage with separatists, which I endorse. But I asked a question: are separatists do they represent the legitimate aspirations of Anglophones? Do separatists represent the legitimate aspirations of Anglophones?
How would I know that?
If they don't represent that aspiration, then they cannot be the voice of Anglophone. That is clear. We are talking about a state.
Okay. Issues of network there. I'll put that same question to you, Dr. Nick. How do we get everybody on the same page, even those who are standing on very far away and difficult positions, who are saying that we want this or nothing?
You see, when I started to talk, the apostle said I was on the wrong track. Mondoa said I was on the wrong track, but when you listen to them very carefully, even Barrister here, you know, we talk around a couple of things, and you see, at the end of the day, we are dealing with three groups of people, and the answers lie in these three groups. The Unionists, the Federalists slash Confederalists.
Okay, if you're back, you can just move on.
Okay.
You're coming.
Yeah, I'm back. Thanks.
Just right on.
Yeah, good. Like I was saying, the question now becomes who, because all of us cannot come to the table, even if it's just the Anglophones. We are 8 million, based on the statistics. We are 8 million. Who are those to come on the table? There's a fundamental question we have to answer. For sure, he talked about the need for us to treat this as a medical situation. What's happening? I lost.
Just go on. You are on.
Okay.
Yeah.
He said the need for us to treat this as a medical situation. But even a medical situation has a basic process that has to be followed. You can't just move into the lab and get a knife, and because you heard there's an abscess, you start getting. There's a process you have to follow to ensure that you don't inflict further victim on the patient. We have identified the abscess. How do we get to the abscess? The abscess is covered by the layers of the stomach, which I stated initially that this constitutes the Anglophone crisis that must be unpacked to get to the Anglophone problem. What is a problem now, like he said, is the separatists and the government that don't want to come to a consensus. How do we bring these parties together? If we cannot bring them together, it's obvious we have to silence one. How do you silence one? Then you have to get to the people to get the person to speak for them. It's good, we all need solutions, but let's see how to get workable solutions. We have been talking this over and over. You have 5 different groups of the IG, like you said. You have this name there, restoration whatsoever. Now, if you get these people who cannot even agree amongst themselves, and you expect them to be the one who wants to be the bearers of the message of Anglophones, would you get a solution? Let's be practical. Let's be practical. There is an abscess which we have identified. Does medical protocol warrant a due process to be followed in reaching that? Would the government get up today and negotiate a power sharing arrangement with separatists? Who does that in which country?
Who is sharing power? All this matter.
I will plead that we focus on the realities on the ground, recognize the rights and duties of the parties involved, and make a solution therefrom. I am scared rushing to a quick issue of negotiation, which is necessary. But negotiating on what? What are we negotiating on? I'm prepared we negotiate on peace. And in my initial submission, I pleaded that if there is a possibility, haven't recognized that there was a problem, then all parties who were arrested and detained in connection to the crisis should be released as a first step. And then we see how to engage in addressing the issues that were raised progressively. But at least we should come to a cessation of the hostilities, and there should be an end to the irrelevant killings. If we don't address this, we can keep on making the debates, make the pronouncements and whatsoever, and we'll lose other years. Lives are being wasted. The first thing we need now is peace. And how do we get peace? There is a need to get a political solution which would put an end to hostilities. Like he rightly stated, the president has the duty and the possibility to make pronouncements that can halt the hostilities. I think he's the only person authorized now to make that pronouncement. If we get that done, then we can come back as children of the same family to address the issues that brought us to where we are today.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Leo.
Thank you too, Dr. Nick. Practically speaking, what standard protocol should be followed to get everybody on board, speak the same language, and end up with brothers and sisters living together like you said earlier on?
We have to realize that, you know, it doesn't matter how complex this Anglophone problem or crisis is, there are only three ways, three solutions. The one solution has been the solution of the Unionists with the decentralization as it came out of the major national dialogue, which is not going down well. Then the separatists are looking for a separation, which is another extreme. So we have these two extremes. And the middle of the road is the federal structure or confederation. To get people to get, like when I'm listening to Apostle Ambe talking and Paul talking, we would do this. But somebody is carrying the gun, and you never gave him the permission to carry the gun. So you are coming with a carrot and say, I give you this carrot so that you put down the gun, let us get somewhere. So you must be showing him where you are going to, which is palatable. It's not just, you don't come and then just tell him, no, it doesn't. You have to be showing him the roadmap where you are going to, and it will be so palatable, then he will come along with you and the problem will be solved. If we are just talking and saying, we'll just do this, it doesn't work like that. Monsieur, ça marche pas comme ça.
Yeah, but practically speaking, how do we get to what you're saying? You have to,
first and foremost, the current government cannot solve the problem.
So practically speaking,
you need people with a different mindset. You need people with a different mindset to solve it, because they are stuck in the unionist agenda, and they don't want to see separatists. You understand?
Dr. Nick, you're a CPDM militant.
I'm a CPDM, so we have a problem to be solved. No, it's not the CPDM out of government. It can still be a CPDM, but the problems must be addressed. If the parliament for 4 years has not talked about it, then how do you intend to solve the problem? Might be Achu would tell us how to solve the problem. Yeah, but I can tell you that the special status is not working.
Okay. Yes. No, you should understand that way back in 2016, 95% of Anglophones were for this thing. Well, let's be frank. But I can tell you today, as of date, less than 10% is still for it. Why? Because government policies that have implemented over the time has come to show that you must respect constituted authority. When once a legitimate system has been put in place to manage the affairs of the state, to manage the system of the governance, to manage the way the society functions, whether you like it or not, only that legitimate structure can say things that will work. Whether you like it or not, the GDR is working. What I like is that so many people have changed their stance. But you should understand that people changing stance is because of particular interest. They realize that that chaotic thing that called separation, organized by some riffraffs, means it cannot help you and me. No matter what we say, they cannot. Because first of all, they are so poorly organized. Secondly, the ideology is not there to back them up. And then thirdly, they don't have the mindset to support what they've been preaching about using guns to fight to separate the country. When once you've been given the mantle of leadership, you are the one now to decide. Anybody who comes around the corner to make noise will only make noise till the day that person becomes a leader. For today, we have one leader, and the way he has decided to manage this thing, whether you like it or not, since 2016, there's been serious progress. So many people have withdrawn from this thing. So many foreign, but international community, in quotes, as you said, have now seen a different view of what is happening in Cameroon. Cameroon, that used to cause some doubts in the minds of certain persons, is now a perfect country, which is being run, although normally, despite the so-called crisis, we now realize that even those who are carrying guns are very limited in their approach, because they can fight a real army. They can confront an army. They can do only hit and run and attack the population. So they're defending they have no territory. They're living in bushes. How can you say you're a separatist when you're living in a bush? You have no territory which is yours. You're not governing anything. You're not controlling anything. You're only hurting people. And you say, no. So at the end of the day, people have come to realize that thing was a chaos, and they gave their consent to this. But at the end of it, what you like it or not, the Prime Minister of this country is an origin from the Northwest and Southwest region. Whether you like it or not, we have to evolve with time. Cameroon was at one time called Cameroon with a K. It changed. to Southern Cameroons, Northern Cameroons, and La Republic Cameroon. It has changed. It changed to United Republic of Federal Republic of Cameroon. It changed to United Republic of Cameroon. It is now La Republic of Cameroon. So life, whether you like it, not evolves.
It's La
and
Republic,
everything
not the
goes.
Republic of Cameroon.
La Republic of Cameroon.
Is it not the Republic of Cameroon?
It's the Republic of Cameroon.
Okay.
So life, like it evolves. In those days, the trousers people you're wearing, we used to call them Tana.
Okay.
With small foot, small leg. When Paddy Lavant came, everybody abandoned these trousers. I was wearing that the trouser with the big leg like that. But today, what is happening? These same trousers that were abandoned, we're now wearing them every day. So that's how life is. Everything changes according to the situation in which you find yourself. It has to evolve, and people adjust with the times. Those who supported the separatist movement are now backing away. They've evolved. So many. That's why I say, from the way I look at things, those who apologize to the society and write to the proper quarters to say, look, I've realized my mistake, should be pardoned. I'm in for that. But you should first of all realize they made a mistake, and which is normal to make mistakes in life. But you should be capable and strong enough to say, look, I made a mistake, and you assume it and you say it, or you beg for forgiveness. That's what we're waiting for most of them now, I believe. And if that is done, this thing will stop. So if those guys, especially the guys in jail, don't do it, they still keep being obstinate and thinking that what they're doing is right. They don't apologize so that there should be some sort of conciliation. It will not work. Just can you imagine guys who have killed, spilled blood, are being rehabilitated? It's a system of forgiving them for what they've done. That's the method of doing it. There's so many ways. We will not wait for God to come and do it for us. We human beings can do it too. They are there, and in their numbers, I hear about 300 or 400 in each of the regions. Mm-hmm. But that is good enough. They've dropped their guns, they're there. No matter the situation where they find themselves, one thing is certain: they'll come back to the society without going to jail.
Okay. Now, Apostle Ambe Valentine, your last submission to this: can the international community, as we speak, help out in providing a solution to the Anglophone crisis? Can they play a role, or should we expect them to play a role in bringing everybody to the table and finding a lasting solution to the ongoing crisis?
Where we are trying to drag the international community into the crisis is on a page that they have left.
Okay.
They were supposed to have been brought in if I thought they were contributors to the crisis presently. We are taking them back to 1961, which automatically I don't think they are interested. Recently, Tibonagi said they are not interested in what happened in 1961. Thinking of the international community to come in to resolve this problem, I think is a serious challenge. To the best of my understanding, if we are talking about inclusive dialogue, say it doesn't matter age, disabilities, doesn't matter your medical condition or whatever. That's an inclusive dialogue, which means we can select some credible African leaders, bring them in to stand as either witnesses, observers, to see how the thing could be solved. I don't think the international community, from every ramification, is interested in solving this crisis. This crisis can only be solved by Cameroonians. And I believe that if at all we put our sense of judgment in order and reason like Cameroonians and look at the consequences of the crisis, the casualties, the damages and the destruction so far the crisis has brought, we will not be holding on to what we think is supposedly our right. Sometimes it's good to even say your right to preserve life. You must not hold your right when lives are going down. Sometimes you need to sell your right in order to preserve life. And Jesus sold his right on the cross. He said, I have power to tell my Father to send angels to kill all of you in this place. But because of the fact that I'm here to secure humanity for tomorrow, I will let myself to die on the cross. Sometimes you preserve by losing. You don't preserve by holding. You preserve by not winning. You preserve by losing a battle. So I think if we judge with our senses and we see the atrocities committed so far and what is yet to be committed, because I believe if this crisis ended in 2017, we will not have the amount of death we've recorded now. It's still time for us to stop it now, because by 2025, the amount of death we'll record by that time will be higher than what we are recording right now. So a stitch in time saves 9. It is true. Anger, bitterness, rancor, strife, malice, spark up the crisis. But I think as the days go by, we should be able to look at what our anger has cost us. The Bible says anger rests in the bosom of fools. If you look at the atrocities committed so far, you realize that that singular moment of anger has caused damages beyond our expectation. So I think that pain for what we have been through and what we are still going through as a nation, as a people, should go down. We should, subjugate that pain and then think of the consequences. Think of the atrocities committed so far. Think of who is winning, because at the end of the day, nobody is winning. The government isn't winning. The separatists isn't winning. So it's time for us to rise up and fight for peace, fight for reconciliation, fight for love, and fight for unity. That is the best of my understanding. I can't be in my house is crumbling, I'm expecting a stranger who has his own challenges. We should have learned in Africa ere long that we are not a subject when it comes to international diplomacy. When crises break out in Barcelona, the next day UN intervened. Now we have a crisis in Ukraine. America is there backing it up. The other time there was a crisis in Crimea. People rose up. What is happening in Africa is not about their focus. So thinking of them coming here should be the error of the century, because we have, by experience, known that they are never focused or interested with what happens in Africa. Out of 30 challenges in Africa, they may come only for at least 1 or 2. And that is because their interest in those 2 is at stake. I think it's important for us to have learned behind that none of these international bodies will ever come here to rescue us from this crisis. Let us look deep into our hearts. And I can tell you, it's not every solution you get by revenging. There's a solution you get by forgiving.
Okay. Mondoa, Paul, we are talking about inclusive dialogue. There are persons who actually believe within and without a Cameroon that the international community should come in forcefully to bring people to engaging in a dialogue described as genuine and inclusive. Do you see the international community stepping in to help the situation? And should they not force the hands either of the government or the separatists? What options are we left with?
Thank you very much, Mr. Leo. If you have to visit from 2017 till present date, we have got several we urge you declarations, we condemn, we urge, we call on, and all of this has not taken us a step forward. I doubt if these institutions have more to add to what they have done. We as Cameroonians are the ones facing the consequences of this conflict. And I strongly believe the solution to the conflicts can only come from within Cameroon or a dialogue among Cameroonians. That's why I insisted at the onset that there is a need to open the doors to get brothers and sisters who are out there, kept by circumstances of prevailing realities, to be welcomed back home as Cameroonians, and let's engage on how to resolve this issue as Cameroonians. Getting the international community is good, but how many of them are prepared to engage? They are not prepared to engage. Do we wait for eternity while lives and livelihoods are wasted? I think it's time we count the debts, we count the losses, and tell ourselves we have lost it, but we still have a possibility to catch up with what is left. I think it's more important now to focus on preserving lives, and this cannot be obtained other than looking for means and avenues to put an end to the ongoing conflict. I think that's what we have to get, and one who hopes for a solution out of Cameroon might wait for too long. Okay. So I believe that we need to work as Cameroonians, talk to ourselves as brothers and sisters, tell ourselves where we went wrong, try to revisit ourselves, and look for a way forward. I think as Cameroonians, if we are willing, we can do it.
If we are willing, we can do it. Dr. Nick Ngwanyam, you have been talking about a crystal ball for 2 years now. And many persons have written to ask that for how long should they be waiting? What if no other inclusive dialogue is organized like you have announced? What do we do?
Let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. There's only one way out of this, to have an inclusive, genuine dialogue. There are no two ways. It's the only way. And then if the government cannot just go down and just be killing people because, no, just because it has guns and has the military, you cannot do that. You cannot just go killing your children. And the Amber boys cannot just go killing army and killing civilians. You can't do that.
Yeah, the government
must stop.
The government would say, okay, previously some members said there was no Anglophone crisis, but the President of the Republic said, I'm calling for a major national dialogue because I recognize that there is a problem. That is already a step taken of acceptance.
Correct.
And a concession made. The government will say we release some prisoners who were taken. That is already another concession. The government will say at the Supreme Court there is a common law bench that we have created to admit that there was a problem. We have done this, and a host of others. Even the major national dialogue, we are taking these steps as a concession. What are you doing on the other side? Well, because we are talking about shifting grounds here.
Yeah, we are shifting grounds, but you know, we've been talking and beating around the bush for long, okay? I don't want to be arguing on this to and fro thing. Let me leave it to Achu. But the bottom line is there would be an inclusive and a genuine dialogue, and that dialogue would decide on the form of state that is at least acceptable to most of the people. You must give the separatists something. You must give them something. You must give them something, whether you like it or not. You must give them something. When you begin to give them something, and that is genuine, a lot of these problems will settle. It's not just talk. No, you must give them something which is genuine.
So the government has to give the separatists something.
The separatists don't give nothing.
No. See, you can laugh about it. I mean, I feel so bad about it. We can continue with whatever Achu is saying and see how long it's going to take us. Either we use wisdom and solve this problem, or we continue to behave like this. Because you know, when you were just talking a moment ago, you said that there was a problem, but members of government kept refusing until the president said, actually there's a problem, let's talk about it. So the bottom line is you have a lot of people in government who don't speak the truth. So it has always been a crisis of the truth and love. Once you don't have love, when you don't have the truth, you know, things will all go wrong. Okay. Until the president puts down his foot. When the president says, no, there's a problem, then everybody, there's a problem. But until he puts down his foot, everybody runs around in circles.
The truth should be spoken from both sides.
And yeah, the truth should be spoken from both sides. They should be spoken from both sides, and all this should be done in love. And the issues are form of state. Thank you.
Okay. A form of state, federation? Or confederation?
Whatever, let us talk about it and agree on that table, and the bottom line is you come to the central position, because when we say form of state, you know, we can argue there's not going to be a separation.
Where should that table be? In Cameroon?
Well, let's create if we create a conducive if you like, we can go to Ambe or Santa if you wish. But we can go to any country, we can go to Ghana, we can go to Nigeria, we can go anywhere and talk about it. It doesn't matter, we can go to the moon. The most important thing, it doesn't matter where we are, speak truth in love, period. Okay.
Mr. Achu Julius, you maintain that people should drop their guns and embrace peace?
That is automatic. That is only solution.
Okay.
There cannot be two solutions. When you cannot carry guns and you think you can talk to me, I will not sit down and talk to you. You know, the government has been giving concessions since 2016. Solving one problem to the other. I always ask this question: you separatists, what have you people solved? You maintain your stance, and everybody should look at you and be clapping. At the end of the day, realize that you are not orderly, and you don't seem to have a way forward. You seem to be stuck in the small idea you have about separation. Is that how they separate the country? Anyway, we're talking about a form of government here. There's been no way in the world that a group of people just sit like that and decide about a form of government. You have to go for elections. You have to go for elections, get the majority in parliament, and run the country. We are positioned, we are ideals, we are ideas, we are ideology. We want you sold to the population to be voted. That's the only way. You know, I always say that Anglophones, because you know this thing of Anglophones is so mixed up now that you don't know who is who. We like dictatorships. A small group of people will sit somewhere and decide for you and me and say it must be this or nothing else. It started since AC1, AC2, ACNC, IG, ADC, ADF, all those dictatorial groups which have never been voted by anybody. They sit down in some tight corner, they take decisions and one imposes on the rest of the people. That's why it never works. SDL carried the day because they came out with a national program. And with the national program, people bought into it. And that's why the party has its legitimacy till date. They didn't impose anything on anybody. They brought ideas which the population liked, and they brought them in to come and meet the CPDM, which has been there before, which is normal. That's how you do. That's how you get a form of government. If you want to change the form of government, we're using these dictatorial groups, you have anarchy. I said it in Mali. I said in Burkina Faso. Insofar as they decide that they will rule there only by the gun, they will always be ruled by the gun. There will soon be another new captain with his own gun overthrow the next one to take over because they don't go for democracy. They don't want democracy. The democratic rules at least to be applied. That's the only way you can change the form of government. There's no other way by you say, okay, we say, okay, there are two extremes, fine. You decide there are two extremes. The government is not considering the separate extremes. They are considering their move as a move of as criminals because they are not there to decide, they're not there to abide by any rule of law from anywhere. They say, no, we have our country and we have to take guns and do what we like. No rule of law is respected, no rules, nothing, no ethics, nothing. Nobody is respected, everybody is a general or a field marshal or a colonel or whatever. We don't know who put them there, and they decide that they can run their own system like that. It cannot work that way in a country that respects the rule of law. No matter how bad the laws are, the rule of law always takes precedence to any other thing. Concerning those guys out there, you see, you cannot be wanting dual nationality, and you think it's by taking up guns that they'll give it to you. They have to, these guys, I don't know what they imagine, that they will sponsor what's going on in Cameroon and they believe that it will just work, and now they're crying. If you want something in politics, you present it, you do a good presentation of it, and sell it to the population. The population will buy it. Parliamentarians will buy it. The executive members will buy it. And it will go through parliament, it becomes law. And once it becomes law, nobody can change it. Everybody has to respect it the way it is.
Okay.
But as of date, it is difficult to have dual nationality because the law has not yet been changed.
Okay. We are out of time. Mondoa, Paul, we want to say thank you for coming today.
Thanks a million, Mr. Leo.
Okay. And
thanks a million.
okay. And Dr. Nick, you had something to say about the death of a lady in Dub, and a message you have for especially ladies who take on transporting themselves using bikes.
Yes, brothers and sisters, I just want to share with you this.
Can we have the videos on our screen, please?
This unfortunate incident that happened in Dub, where a lady died, a lady lost her life, and she and the bike rider, they all lost their lives. And what actually happened was that this lady, she had this long hair tie and hair and so on, and as they were riding, you know, the hair and the hair tie, they got caught in the wheel of the and then that twisted her neck and threw her off the motorcycle and killed her, as well as the bike rider. And when I was telling you, when I was coming to the studio this evening, I saw another woman on a bike with long things flowing all over the whole place. You know, many people are not aware of physics and many other things, and so they expose themselves to a lot of danger. And I thought I should just signal this to all of you ladies with all this long hair and skirts that are flowing everywhere. Please, when you are sitting on the motorcycle, be very careful. Gather all those things and make them into one bit. When you have those things that are flowing like that, if it gets caught in the wheels of the bike, you are as good as dead. Another source, in the spokes, you are dead. Another source of worry is when you see some of this on the motorcycles, you see people carry a lot of things, especially they buy metal, you know, building material, you know, aluminum rods, and they carry them on the motorcycle and they are going through traffic. That thing is very dangerous. It is a spear, and it can hurt some other. It can hurt somebody in a car. It can knock through your windscreen and kill you. It can kill some other people. That thing is very, very dangerous. And what makes it even more so is that, you know, everybody will bear with me that, you know, the traffic regulations say that when you carry something that goes beyond the size of your vehicle, you should tie something, a cloth or something on it, so that people are at the front and the back, so that people can see it. But people ride on these things like that, or even on these tricycles, they just carry the things and they don't do this, and it's very, very dangerous, and people are losing their lives. I'm just begging.
Thank you for passing that message across, Dr. Nick, and thank you to Apostle for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. It's always a joy to be here to educate Cameroonians.
Dr. Nick says the government needs to move to fix this problem.
They will fix it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for inviting me. The government is fixing it.
Okay.
If you don't realize that there's been progress since 2016, then you are not living in this country.
We want to thank you all who took time off to watch this edition of the program. Thank you to you, Desmond and Eli, for producing the program. Not forgetting you, Tambe Bryant, for supervising all that we have been doing here since morning. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.